that cold night in the spring. On the day of the incident, the village was full of joy, and the commune's movie boat was again moored at the stone dock in Wang village. This was the first movie in the village after Wang Linfang was double dismissed, and the village was swirling with a sense of uncontrollable joy. Yu Xiu was quite happy to have a movie to watch. Wang Linfang was double expelled, but on this issue, Yu Xiu and Yumi were different. Yumi also seemed to be indifferent, but that was made up, putting on a face for others to see. The one who really didn't care was Yu Xiu. Yu Xiu is beautiful, and a person's beauty is something that no one could dismiss. So after the movie started, Yu Xiu went to see it, but Yumi didn't. Of course, Yu Xiu was still a smart girl. She was restrained. This time, watching the movie, Yu Xiu did not go to grab the middle seat. In the past, when there was a movie in the village, the best seats were Yu Xiu's family's. No one dares to seize them with their family. If you beat a dog without looking at the master, you are not a person who knows how to live. Yu Xiu brought Yu Ye with her, and instead of burrowing into the crowd, she stood on periphery, the last row of the crowd. Yu Ye was young and not able to watch it, and Wang Caiguang's wife was not a snob, quite polite, beckoning them to go over. Courteously gave up the seat and pulled Yu Ye onto the bench. A few years ago, Caiguang's had been the concubine of Wang Lianfang, and after the incident, Caiguang's drank pesticide and jumped into the river, with her head covered in hair, which had a terrible influence. The good thing was that this incident had been over for several years. Yu Xiu stood by the side of Caiguang's, concentrating on watching the movie. It was a bit cold, and the night wind was pouring into her neck. Yu Xiu held her hands so tightly, and her neck was lodged in the collar of her coat. Halfway through the movie, Yu Xiu wanted to take a leak, but the wind was so strong that the screen bowed up, and the characters in the movie all bent their backs, one by one, like humpbacks. Yu Xiu thought about it, but still held it, and planned to do it at home. Cold wind shortens necks, and cold day longers urines. This saying is really true. The American bombers flew over, dropping bombs over the Yalu River. Bombs with whistles, and that sounded like making children pee. The Yalu River was bombed into columns of water. The general attack was about to begin, and the movie was getting better and better. Yu Xiu was suddenly blindfolded with hands behind her. This is the most common joke in the countryside. The movie was so good, and if it was in the past, Yu Xiu would have cursed out his ancestors. This time, Yu Xiu did not. Yu Xiu smiled and said, "Dead man, your ghost paws are cold." But Yu Xiu quickly realized that those hands were too hard to be a joke. With a little upset, Yu Xiu was about to speak up, but her mouth was gagged by the straw. Yu Xiu was yanked out of the crowd, and all at once many hands were on her, and those hands set Yu Xiu up. Her feet were in the air. The sound of footsteps was urgent and chaotic. Yu Xiu began to struggle. Yu Xiu's struggle was all out, yet silent. The sound of gunfire in the movie was getting further and further away, and Yu Xiu was held down on the straw stack. Her eyes were wrapped tightly, and her pants were peeled. Yu Xiu's lower body was all of a sudden bared to the night air, and she suddenly had a jolt. Yu Xiu never expected that she would actually pee after being stripped naked. Silence fell around the straw pallet, and it was only chaotic and ragged panting. Yu Xiu could hear it. Yu Xiu's head was already empty, but she still knew that she loved her face and tried to hold it in, but didn't. Yu Xiu even heard the whistle of her own peeing. Yu Xiu finished the peeing, and the surroundings suddenly chaotic again. A woman lowered her voice and said sternly, "Do not mess, one by one, one by one." Yu Xiu heard it, a bit like Caiguang's, but could not be sure. Even though she was still a girl, Yu Xiu had already penetratingly sensed the danger in her lower body and clenched her legs tightly. 4 big hands, however, spread Yu Xiu's thighs apart and held them down. A hard stick was pressed against Yu Xiu's thighs and shoved into Yu Xiu in one swift motion. Yu Xiu, like rotten straw, was finally helped home by Yumi. At the same time, Yu Ye was also brought home by Yumi. Yu Ye was still young after all, so she cried a few times, said it hurt a few times, cleaned herself up, and went to sleep. But Yu Xiu was different. She was a 17-year-old and understood. Yu Xiu was held in Yumi's arms and could not sleep a wink all night. Yu Xiu kept crying. By the second half of the night, Yu Xiu's eyes were swollen from crying, and she could hardly open them. Yumi had been accompanying Yu Xiu, wiping Yu Xiu's tears and shedding tears with Yu Xiu. They had never been close like this in more than 10 years, and they were even dependent on each other. Yu Xiu lay down all day the next day, not eating or drinking, and had nightmares one after another. Yumi held the bowl, brought it over, took it away, and brought it back. Yu Xiu didn't touch it at all. On the morning of the 4th day, Yu Xiu finally opened her lips, and a white scab appeared on her lips. Yumi was feeding her with a bowl in one hand and a spoon in the other, bite by bite, slowly. After finishing a small bowl of glutinous rice porridge, Yu Xiu looked at her eldest sister, suddenly stretched out her arms, and grabbed Yumi's waist without moving. Yu Xiu's arms were so weak, but they were so tight that like the fists of a corpse that couldn't be opened. Yumi did not open them, but used her fingers to smooth Yu Xiu's hair, little by little. After finishing it, she combed it again and began to braid Yu Xiu's 2 long braids. Yumi ordered Yu Yang to bring a basin of water and washed it for Yu Xiu. She took Yu Xiu's hand and said, "Get up and come out with me." Her voice was not loud, but it was full of the majesty of a sister. Yu Xiu's stigmatized eyes shrouded her eldest sister, and she just shook her head. Yumi said, "Just hide like this. How long will you hide? Who has anyone in our family been afraid of?"